When you truly defeat a narcissist, the breakthrough does not arrive with a massive, explosive argument, a dramatic, cinematic showdown, or a satisfying confession of guilt. The ultimate sign of your victory is something far more jarring, and it is the exact opposite of what most survivors expect. It is absolute, total, and deafening silence. For anyone who has spent months or years trapped in the chaotic cycle of narcissistic abuse, this sudden drop to zero noise can feel incredibly strange and even unnerving. You are so conditioned to constant warfare, endless text paragraphs, and predictable emotional roller coasters that when the landscape suddenly goes completely still, your brain does not know how to process it. But this isn't just a pause in the music, it is the definitive end of the game. It is the moment the parasite realizes the host is completely locked down, and the psychological shockwave forces them into an uncharacteristic, permanent retreat. To fully grasp the massive weight of this specific silence, you have to look closely at what it is not, because a narcissist uses silence as a weapon all the time. This is absolutely not the standard everyday silent treatment you experience during the relationship, which was carefully designed to punish you, manipulate you, and make you beg for forgiveness. It is not cold shoulder ghosting or a planned disappearance meant to trigger your abandonment anxiety so you start chasing after them to fix things. It is not even the temporary quiet phase of a typical discard where they ignore you for a few weeks while testing out a shiny new target. Those common tactics are all active forms of psychological warfare, built entirely on the expectation that you will eventually crack, break down, and crawl back to give them control. This new silence is something entirely different. This is the heavy, motionless quiet of true, undeniable defeat, born from the fact that they have officially run out of moves. To see why this silence is such a massive shift, think about how an undefeated narcissist normally reacts whenever you try to walk away, set a solid boundary, or call out their lies. They never just accept it and walk away. Instead, they launch into a highly predictable, aggressive counterattack because their fragile ego cannot handle a threat to their dominance. They will throw everything they have at you. First come the desperate hoovering attempts, where they suddenly transform into the sweet, apologetic person you always wanted them to be, weaponizing fake promises of therapy, tears, and nostalgic memories just to pull you back into their web. If that fake kindness fails, they immediately flip the switch into a terrifying narcissistic rage, screaming, throwing insults, and intimidating you because they are panicking over their loss of control. If you still stand strong, they pivot directly into a vicious, calculated smear campaign, whispering poison to your friends, family, and co-workers to systematically destroy your reputation out of pure spite. An undefeated narcissist will always find a way to engage with you because to them, even a massive, toxic fight is better than being ignored. A fight means they still have a hook in your mouth. But everything changes the exact moment you build total, unshakable mental freedom within yourself. When you reach that deep psychological tipping point where you see right through their mask and they realize on a subconscious level that their entire playbook has become useless, the energy completely shifts. The drama machine grinds to a halt, and the response drops to absolute zero. You get no desperate midnight texts, no explosive rages, no toxic smear campaigns, and no carefully staged accidental run-ins at your favorite local spots. This total blankness is the narcissist's ultimate unspoken admission that they have permanently lost all psychological access to your life. They know they can no longer manipulate your thoughts, trigger your insecurities, or access your emotional energy. The door is not just locked, it has been completely bricked over, and for the first time in their life, they are staring at an impenetrable wall they cannot bypass. For a survivor who has been systematically trained to expect non-stop crisis, mind games, and predictable relational trauma, this sudden, eerie quiet can actually feel incredibly disorienting at first. Instead of feeling instant peace, you might find yourself stuck in a hypervigilant state, constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. You brace yourself every morning for an incoming wave of drama, hyper-analyzing your phone, anticipating a cruel email, or mentally preparing your defense for a smear campaign that you assume is coming around the corner. But the attack never actually arrives. Weeks turn into months, and the silence just stretches on. This happens because of a fundamental law in the mind of a narcissist. They only invest their time and energy where they believe there is still a weak spot left to exploit. They only chase you when they smell a lingering trace of hope, guilt, or self-doubt that they can use as a crowbar to pry their way back into your mind. The truth is, a narcissist uses anger and chaos the exact same way a hacker uses software. They're just looking for an emotional vulnerability to breach your defenses. They throw a tantrum because they expect their anger to make you question your own reality, feel guilty, and force you into an anxious defense mode. The second you step into that ring to defend yourself, you have already lost, because your raw emotional reaction gives them the exact hit of energetic supply they crave. But when they look at you and see that your boundaries are made of reinforced concrete, and that you have reached a state of pure, cold indifference, the game loses all value to them. You have become what psychologists call a closed system. You are completely self-contained. You refuse to give them positive supply through affection, and you fiercely deny them negative supply by refusing to get angry, hurt, or reactive. Because you offer absolutely nothing left for them to mine, extract, or exploit, wasting energy on you becomes a losing business proposition. Their ego cannot tolerate wasting effort on a dry well, so they are forced to pack up their illusion and move on to find much easier, less defended targets. This total and absolute silence is not a grand gesture of respect for your newfound boundaries, nor is it a mature decision to grant you peace. It is an act of pure, desperate self-preservation, a psychological armor deployed because their fragile ego is in survival mode. You must understand that in the mind of a narcissist, life is a strict zero-sum game of winners and losers, predators and prey. For them to continue chasing you, knocking on your door, or sending unread messages while getting absolutely zero emotional reaction from you would mean forcing themselves to swallow a lethal truth that they have lost. It would be a blatant admission that they need you infinitely more than you need them, and that their complex web of mind games has utterly failed against your resolve. Because their entire internal structure is built on a delusion of absolute superiority, their ego literally cannot survive the reality of repeated, humiliating rejection. To shield themselves from the devastating psychic pain of being completely defeated by someone they viewed as underneath them, they choose to vanish entirely, treating their sudden disappearance as a shield to hide their profound shame. This defensive retreat goes infinitely deeper than a typical person's decision to go no contact. When a narcissist is truly broken by your indifference, they completely cut off the invisible threads that usually keep them tethered to an ex-partner. They stop aggressively monitoring your social media feeds from burner accounts. They stop casually dropping your name to mutual friends to fish for information. And they stop orchestrating those seemingly accidental, highly staged run-ins at your favorite spots. They stop because they are hyper-aware that any form of tracking, lingering, or checking in would send a glaring, undeniable signal to you and the rest of the world that they still care, that they are still paying attention, and that you still hold power over their emotional state. Instead, they desperately need to convince themselves, their enablers, and anyone who will listen, that they are perfectly fine, that they moved on without a single scratch, and that you were entirely insignificant and easily replaced. This absolute wall of silence becomes their ultimate way of saving face. It allows them to retreat into their own twisted mind and rewrite the internal script, manufacturing a delusional narrative where they were the ones who walked away out of boredom, rather than facing the agonizing truth that they were permanently locked out by your strength. If you have built boundaries strong and unyielding enough to trigger this level of ghost-like quiet, do not second-guess it. Recognize it as the ultimate badge of your psychological victory. Their total absence speaks volumes, telling you everything you need to know. You successfully broke the toxic cycle. You drained the board of every single move they had left, and they are fully aware they have absolutely nothing left to work with. But true defeat does not stop at a silent retreat. It triggers a profound internal collapse that quickly bleeds into the narcissist's daily life, becoming completely visible to the outside world. Most people falsely assume that once a narcissist leaves, they just seamlessly hop to the next victim and live the exact same life without missing a beat. But when you completely remove yourself from their equation, you are doing something far more damaging than just cutting off validation or attention. You are ripping away the hidden psychological anchor that kept their volatile, chaotic inner world from spinning out of control. Individuals with deep empathy, integrity, and emotional resilience don't just love a narcissist. They inadvertently serve as an invisible life support system for their fractured personality. For months or years, you were the one quietly absorbing their unhinged emotional chaos, carrying the heavy burden of their toxic projections, reflecting a stable sense of self back to their empty core, and constantly regulating their hyper-reactive nervous system. You were the emotional buffer between their inner madness and the outside world. Once you permanently withdraw that massive amount of free, high-grade emotional labor, their internal stabilizing force is gone, and the heavy black sludge of their inner chaos immediately begins to leak into every single area of their public and private existence. This systemic unraveling almost always strikes their professional life first, fracturing the polished, highly capable image they spent years meticulously building. The brilliant executive, the charming salesman, or the organized professional suddenly begins to drop the ball in ways that leave their colleagues completely baffled. They start missing critical deadlines, making uncharacteristic, careless mistakes, and picking intense, irrational fights with coworkers or managers, fights that their usual superficial charm and smooth-talking manipulation can no longer fix. Their productivity plummets, important projects fall apart at the seams, and opportunities for promotion vanish as their professional reputation cracks right in front of bosses who once praised them. At the exact same time, this structural collapse destroys their personal relationships. Deprived of your high-quality emotional containment, the narcissist begins burning through new, low-grade sources of supply at a desperate, accelerated pace. Because they are starving for validation to soothe their internal panic, their mask slips incredibly fast with new targets, leading to explosive public drama, highly volatile breakups, and a trail of fractured friendships left in their wake. They become messy, loud, and erratic, repeating their entire toxic cycle in weeks rather than years, making their dysfunction so glaringly obvious that even people who used to defend them start backing away in disgust. Finally, this profound psychological decay forces its way to the surface, manifesting as undeniable physical and behavioral warning signs that they can no longer hide behind a manicured front. The narcissist, who always prided themselves on looking flawlessly put together, suddenly begins to show up looking visibly unraveled, unwashed, or completely exhausted. They exhibit drastic, rapid weight fluctuations, plunge headfirst into substance abuse or reckless behaviors to numb their anxiety, and suffer from wild, unpredictable mood swings that terrify the people around them. They transform into a walking pressure cooker of paranoia and desperation, looking and acting like a person who is completely falling apart at the seams, leaving friends and family members deeply uneasy and whispering behind their back. This devastating drop in functioning is the direct mathematical result of losing the invisible psychological scaffolding you provided for them every single day. The cheap, shallow, new sources of supply they frantically scramble to find either lack the deep emotional capacity to stabilize the narcissist's massive chaos, or they are psychologically healthy enough to spot the red flags and run for the hills at the very first sign of toxicity. The grand illusion is officially over. The heavy velvet curtain has fallen, and the world is finally forced to look at the raw, unedited, and highly unstable reality of who this person actually is when they are no longer being held together by your monumental emotional strength. When a narcissist experiences a truly definitive, catastrophic defeat, they do not just pack up their things and leave the relationship. They flee their entire geographic and social environment. They will suddenly pull up stakes, sell their house, abandon long-term social circles they spent a lifetime cultivating, walk away from established careers, and completely start over in a brand new city or country where absolutely nobody knows their name. To understand just how massive this reaction is, you have to look at how a narcissist normally operates when a relationship ends. Under typical circumstances, a narcissist fiercely guards their territory. They stay exactly where they are, hold on to their mutual friends, maintain their social standing, and aggressively parade their new romantic partner or professional success directly in your face. They do this intentionally, hoping to make you feel completely replaced, discarded, and small. But when they are truly defeated, when their mask is ripped off in a highly public way, when their malicious manipulation is permanently documented in writing, or when enough people in their circle finally sit down, compare notes, and connect the dots, staying in that environment becomes an absolute psychological impossibility. They simply cannot survive in a space where the collective memory of the people around them holds objective proof of their failure and exposure. This total flight happens because the narcissist's entire existence depends on maintaining absolute, unyielding control over their personal narrative. They require a pristine, manufactured backstory where they are always the hero, the genius, or the misunderstood martyr. The very second that control is shattered, and the people around them see the ugly reality of their lies, the mental energy required to wake up every day and face a room full of people who know the truth triggers an immediate internal collapse. They cannot look into the eyes of friends, co-workers, or neighbors who have witnessed their exposure because it mirrors back a reality their ego is built to avoid at all costs. To escape this agonizing psychological pressure, they will willingly choose to incur massive, devastating life costs. They will abruptly quit high-paying jobs, cut off lifelong friends who ask too many questions, and completely abandon communities they once dominated, all just to run away from the suffocating reality of being exposed. They are not moving on to bigger and better things. They are running for their lives from a position of absolute, desperate weakness. The moment they touch down in a new location, their very first order of business is to construct a highly elaborate, weaponized victim story to explain their sudden, chaotic move. They present themselves to their new, completely unsuspecting audience as a weary soul who desperately needed a fresh start after being brutally mistreated, betrayed, or held back by envious, toxic people in their old town. They describe their sudden departure not as a panicked retreat, but as a courageous leap of faith to escape an unfair situation. They are forced to rebuild their entire act completely from scratch because they lack even an ounce of the genuine character, humility, or inner strength required to stay put, face their mistakes, and rebuild a broken reputation. They cannot heal or grow, so they must travel. They are perpetually hunting for a geographic blank slate, a place where their history is entirely erased, where no one can call out their fabrications, and where they can safely reestablish their false self before an audience that doesn't know any better. As this collapse deepens, a definitive and incredibly satisfying sign of the narcissist's total defeat begins to manifest from a source you would least expect. The very people who used to protect, defend, and enable them. Out of nowhere, your phone will start lighting up with unexpected messages, emails, or calls from the narcissist's close friends, family members, or loyal coworkers. But the entire tone of their communication will have completely shifted. These are absolutely not the typical hostile flying monkey messages you used to get, which were designed to guilt trip you, blame you for the breakup, or gaslight you into believing the narcissist was the real victim. Instead, these are frantic messages born from genuine worry, deep confusion, and absolute alarm regarding the narcissist's increasingly erratic, unhinged behavior. You will hear people who once ignored you suddenly reaching out to say things like, "They aren't acting like themselves at all," or "Something is terribly wrong with them. They are completely unraveling. Have you spoken to them?" This sudden shift in alliances provides a massive, undeniable wave of psychological validation for you as a survivor. When you were trapped inside that toxic dynamic, trying desperately to set basic boundaries or explain the emotional abuse you were enduring, these exact same individuals likely took the narcissist's side without a second thought. They swallowed the lies about you hook, line, and sinker, dismissed your perspective as crazy or dramatic, and completely validated the narcissist's polished, saintly exterior. But now that you have permanently removed yourself from the equation and cut off the supply, these enablers are left completely unprotected. They are now forced to sit on the front line and deal with the raw, volatile, and uncontained chaos of the narcissist's true personality without you there to act as the emotional lightning rod. The toxic behavior bubbling up from underneath the narcissist's slipping mask is so disturbing and foreign to them that it creates immediate, unshakable doubt in the minds of their closest allies. They are finally waking up to the reality that you were never the problem, and that every single story they were fed about you was an entirely fabricated lie designed to cover up a monster. When these messages start pouring into your inbox, you must remember one crucial truth. You are under absolutely zero obligation to reply to them, explain your past trauma, or help these people manage the narcissist's current crisis. It can be incredibly tempting to use this moment to say, "I told you so," or to deeply explain what you went through, hoping they will finally understand your pain. But you must recognize that these individuals willingly supported and enabled the abuse when it was comfortable and convenient for them. And they are only waking up and reaching out to you now because the narcissist's toxic fallout is directly crashing into their lives. They aren't looking out for you. They are looking for a way to fix the chaos that you used to handle for them. Their frantic outreach is simply the ultimate external confirmation of what you already know in your heart. The narcissist's downfall is absolute, highly visible, and so devastatingly severe that they can no longer maintain the illusion of normalcy for anyone, not even the people who love them most. Your silence in response to their circle is your final victory lap. It proves you have permanently stepped out of the circus, leaving the narcissist and their enablers to sit alone in the wreckage of the drama they created. In rare, extreme cases of total defeat, when every single one of their standard lies has failed and their back is flat against the wall, a narcissist will execute a shocking psychological pivot. They will suddenly abandon their aggressive denials and step into a strategy that looks exactly like raw, vulnerable honesty. When the evidence against them is so completely overwhelming that trying to spin the truth makes them look foolish, they will completely flip the script and adopt an intense narrative of public self-criticism. Out of nowhere, They will start posting lengthy, emotional paragraphs on social media or talking to mutual acquaintances about how they have lost their way, how they allowed their own inner demons to take over, and how they deeply regret hurting beautiful people who never deserved it. They might explicitly announce that they are checking into rehab, starting intensive therapy, or taking a prolonged spiritual sabbatical to fix their profound character flaws. This sudden display of apparent humility can be incredibly jarring to witness, leaving you and everyone else wondering if they have genuinely experienced a massive breakthrough and hit rock bottom. But you must never mistake this performance for actual accountability, true remorse, or a sudden awakening of self-awareness. What you are witnessing is not a changed person. It is simply a highly calculated, tactical pivot designed to salvage whatever is left of their image. When a narcissist's defensive walls are totally flattened by a crushing defeat, their hyper-reactive survival instinct tells them that continuing to argue will only worsen their social ruin. They realize that the crowd has seen through the villain persona, so they instantly audition for the role of the tragic, broken protagonist. By wrapping themselves in the guise of a deeply flawed individual who is bravely seeking redemption, they effectively change the conversation. They shift the spotlight away from the horrific details of the abuse they inflicted and force the audience to focus entirely on their courageous journey toward healing. It is a brilliant, manipulative chess move designed to transform them from an exposed abuser into an inspirational figure who is actively doing the hard work to change. This weaponized confession is an aggressive, preemptive play for sympathy, manufactured entirely to disarm their critics and dictate exactly how their defeat is perceived by the public. By beating everyone else to the punch and loudly announcing their own flaws, they take the ammunition right out of your hands. If you try to speak out against them after they have made this grand public confession, they and their enablers can easily paint you as the bitter, unforgiving villain who refuses to let someone heal and grow from their past mistakes. The narrative beautifully shifts from, "Look at what this monster did," to, "Look at how hard this brave person is trying to fix themselves." Even when they are facing an absolute, undeniable loss, the narcissist's core priority never shifts toward real change. Their entire focus remains locked onto managing the performance, controlling the audience, and milking the crowd for a brand new stream of sympathy and validation. They are simply using pseudo-honesty as a final, desperate shield to protect their ego from the consequences of the truth, proving that even in their absolute downfalls, they are still pulling the strings of the theater.